airplane yesterday near Pewaukee Airport. Channel 5 Science and Aviation reporter Jim Tillman is here with the details of a very dramatic story. Jim?
That's absolutely right, Carol. The controller is a former Air Force controller with 19 years of FAA experience. He used that experience yesterday to give the distressed pilot advice, just as if he was sitting in the same cockpit. What you're about to hear is the actual cockpit transmission. Listen carefully. It is difficult to understand. It all began when the pilot was returning to his home in Michigan and took off from Pewaukee Airport near Wheeling. He almost immediately began to ice up as he entered the clouds and lost the use of almost all of his instruments at a time when he could not see the ground. He then lost control of his airplane and fell over 2,000 feet before the controller could give him instructions to pull out. Air traffic controller Roger Anderson was able to direct the flight back to Pewaukee, where the pilot landed long and struck a barrier off the end of the runway. There were no injuries.
All I did was recognize, I'm a pilot, I'm a flight instructor and an instrument pilot, and all I did was recognize a situation where I thought I could share my experience with a pilot who was in need of my experience at the time. And so that's the only time I think I went beyond what maybe another controller might have done.
Controller Roger Anderson emphasized today that yesterday's success was a result of a team effort. And while he was handling the emergency aircraft, others were rerouting all traffic coming into or out of O'Hare to avoid interference, obviously, with the aircraft in distress. But I must say, in my almost 30 years of aviation experience, I don't know of a better example of an FAA team in action. They deserve our hats off.
I was just wondering, as a pilot, how you felt about that. Because, I mean, I could see someone who was very calm and rational panicking under those circumstances.
I think this man would have, except this pilot that was on the ground was talking with him as if he had holds of the controls, that he felt and sensed everything that was happening with that airplane.
And that sureness conveys itself.
Plane to an emergency landing yesterday says the pilot is the real hero of the whole thing. The single-engine plane with 4 people on board took off yesterday from Pewaukee Airport in northwest suburban Wheeling. Now, shortly after takeoff, the instrument panel on the airplane went completely dead, and the pilot was lost in the clouds. Air traffic controller Roger Anderson talked to that pilot by radio. Here's a tape recording of the last seconds of the flight.
Okay, just start descending now, and you're about 1.5 miles south of Pewaukee. All right, let's roll out straight ahead. All right, we want to be very gentle at this point because you're coming up on the airport. You're about 1 mile south of it. Let's descend a little bit quicker now if you can do it. Maybe reduce your power just a little bit and a little bit of forward pressure to increase that rate of descent. 81 Yankee, and you're going to be over the airport. 81 Yankee, a coordinated turn to the right, a very gentle coordinated turn to the right. Let's reduce the power a little bit, bring back the power, and start looking off to your right very slightly, and the airport is about 1/2 mile away. So, section, am I right? Okay, a little bit of a coordinated right turn, 81 Yankee, and pull the power back a little more. Let's reduce back down, and the airport is just to your right there. Airport is directly to your right, 81 Yankee. It's just to the right there, and they see you. Can you see it? I got it in sight now. You take over and land, and we'll see you later.
Well, that plane landed on the runway of Pewaukee, but it crashed into a guardrail along Milwaukee Avenue before finally coming to a stop. None of the 4 people aboard was seriously hurt. Air traffic controller Anderson then talked to reporters today.
The pilot is the one, if you want to talk to somebody who really responded with cool and calm and is the hero, so to speak, he's the one you'd want to talk to. He's the one that remained calm throughout. He's the one that had to survive the impending imminent disaster that the direction it could have gone.
Boy, that air controller was cool, though. Lester Holt has been covering the story today. What a lot of people don't understand, I think, is that when your instruments in the cockpit go out in an aircraft and you're up in the clouds, not only do you not know where you are, you don't even know what your attitude is. You could be 90 degrees over this way, or you could be flying upside down half the time and you wouldn't know.
That's the hard part. The ceiling was about 600 feet in most parts of Chicago at that time.
So you'd have to get down below that level before you could see anything on the ground.
The top was 5,100 feet. He was in the middle of it. His wings were icing up. He tried to pull up. The air controller wanted to get him above the clouds so he could relax a little bit and see out and get an idea where he was, but he couldn't get up.
How could the controller know where this airplane was? He saw him on radar, but what told the controller what his altitude was? And
well, airplanes are equipped with transponders. Now, some for flying in instrument rules have a transponder that also reads out altitude and speed. So on that scope, he can sit there and 81 Yankee is a blip there, and it'll tell the speed, the direction, and the altitude.
Very dramatic.
It was very dramatic. And the interesting thing was, as the FAA was playing this tape in the news conference today, was that there was silence for 45 minutes, and we listened to the whole drama played out.
You'll have more at 6.
Indeed.
Walter?
Gentlemen, Exxon Corporation, the world.
Hey, one Yankee, I got some problems too with my DGs and my turn coordinator. Hey, one Yankee, once you start a right turn, I'll tell you when to stop it. Okay, do the best I can.
For the next 43 minutes, the fate of 81 Yankee, a small single-engine plane and its 4 passengers, would be in the hands of the O'Hare Radar Control Room. With all the plane's directional instruments dead, the plane virtually lost in the clouds, every left turn, right turn, climb, and descent would be called from the ground by veteran controller Roger Anderson.
One Yankee, you're starting a right turn now. Think turn right. One Yankee, stop the turn and fly straight and level. Straight level now, sir. And 81 Yankee, looking good. You're coming up out of 4,000 feet. Just go ahead and go straight ahead now with whatever cross-references you might have available there. Your airspeed's looking good. Everything's looking stabilized for a moment there.
My first thoughts were, as in early in the tape, I wanted to get him up to visual flight conditions above the clouds without any flight instruments at all, with his artificial horizon or directional gyro, turn coordinator all gone. He might as well have closed his eyes to fly the plane.
But getting the plane above the clouds would not be so easy. Ice was building on its wings, and steering was difficult.
We're going to have to see something here, because I tell you, my plane is really iced up, and I think I'm at a percent right now, pretty good one. Okay, that'll be fine, but I'd like to get you going as straight ahead as possible, 81 Yankee.
As Anderson continued his steady flow of conversation with the pilot of the small plane, other controllers here at O'Hare were guiding other airplanes out of the area. Like many controllers at O'Hare, Roger Anderson is a pilot himself and is also a flight instructor. Though the whole radar room was contributing to the effort of getting that small plane down, Anderson was the one in the hot seat.
I just acted as co-pilot, so to speak, through the radio.
Okay, a little bit of a coordinated right turn, 81 Yankee, and pull the power back a little more. Let's reduce back down, and the airport is just to your right there. The airport is directly to your right, 81 Yankee. It's just to the right there, and they see you. Can you see it? I got it in sight now. You take over and land, and we'll see you later.
The plane made the runway but ran off the end onto Milwaukee Avenue. Nobody was hurt. And there's a pilot saying that any landing you can walk away from is a good one. Roger Anderson seems to agree.
The pilot is the one, if you want to talk to somebody who really responded with cool and calm and is the hero, so to speak, he's the one you'd want to talk to.
The pilot, as we said, is back in Michigan and unavailable for comment tonight. He and his family had come to Chicago to visit the Weeping Madonna at St. Nicholas Albanian Orthodox Church.
No kidding. Well, if that isn't a miracle, I don't know. He's certainly going to be convinced she pulled him through this one. The controller actually seemed to be flying the plane at times.
Well, he is an experienced pilot, general aviation pilot, and an instructor. And if you listen to it's 45 minutes of tape. We obviously had edited it down. But you listen, and he tells him, like, give it a little right rudder. Okay, just pull the yoke back a bit. He obviously knew the airplane, was asking about the instruments. And a lot of the guys at the Radar Center do have flying experience, which sure helps in these sort of situations.
What a story. Well, a lot of...
Anderson told reporters that he used his flying experience to aid the troubled pilot.
He had to have a set of flight instruments to help him survive the remainder of the flight, and I tried to become his set of flight instruments. That's all I was trying to do.
Chris?
Nashville air traffic controllers may have prevented a crash at the airport. A plane was flying in blind. The pilot couldn't see out of the window and his instruments were dead. News Channel 5's David Collin tells us the controllers literally talked him down.
More than 1,000 planes took off from or landed in Nashville today under clear skies, but that's not what it was like last Thursday.
If you were out flying, you'd be doing it in the clouds.
within 30 seconds after departure from an airport, and you would be in the clouds till about 30 seconds before your landing.
Air traffic controller Roger Anderson had to use radar and ground instruments to help a pilot flying in emergency blood supplies to a safe landing. If you listen to a recording of the radio conversation, you can hear the same instructions given to the pilot several times.
You're still making right turns, so just roll your aircraft out straight ahead and we'll let it stabilize a little bit, then we'll give you vectors back around the final, okay?
Anderson, a controller for 28 years and a pilot instructor, learned the plane's instruments had failed. But listen to how calmly he handles the situation.
I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to just make half standard rate turns because I think your heading indicator's off considerably, and I'm going to give you no gyro vectors around towards the airport. Would you like to do that? I'd like to do whatever it takes to get on the ground safely.
Other controllers had to clear the runways of traffic while Anderson talked the pilot of Lifeguard 998 home.
The potential was there. It occurred to me that this may not be a successful situation. We could have an accident.
The pilot didn't want to do an interview on camera, but he told me on the telephone Roger Anderson and his colleagues saved his life.
I was happy for the pilot, and I was happy I was able to have been there. And really, I didn't think about it much beyond that. I was just glad he was safely on the ground and regretted the experience, the trauma he'd had to endure.
Can you see the airport? On the runway in sight. You land on any one arm you want. You're cleared to land. On a 908, you don't know how much I appreciate this.
Oh, I think we do. David Collin, News Channel 5.
And last year, Nashville air traffic controllers helped at least 17 pilots make emergency landings. Vicki?